A group of geologists wandered among the gnarled woods. They walked slowly, skirting ravines flooded with standing water and barky, slimy roots. There was no path for a long time. Instead, there was loose last year's fallen debris, in which tired feet were bogged down. The food supply was running low, and it was still a long way from their destination. It was beginning to get dark when they came to a small running water. There was no limit to their joy, but it was short-lived. In the fur-scented semi-darkness among the black trunks, human deeds began to emerge. Woven of moldy moss and scraggly wood, they drew closer, narrowing the circle. The people noticed them too late. The crackle of tearing flesh and the crunch of breaking bones echoed over the mountains and taiga. There was soft music playing in the bar. I sat behind the bar and sipped my beer leisurely. There were hardly any people around, which was strange at a time like this. It was only about 8 in the evening. Not much time had passed since the last business trip, and I, or rather my body, had undergone some changes. The old orbs had dissipated very quickly, gone white from the wolf's work temples, and in a few days took its usual, given to me by nature color. And my whole appearance changed too. It was like I was 10 years younger. Now, standing next to me, you wouldn't think I was in my 40s. I even had to embarrass myself at work by saying I'd bought a spa membership. Anyway, it doesn't bother me, which means I can relax. Fucking relax. You've been imbued with some unrealistically weird artifact, and you're not trying to figure it out, you say. How do you envision it? To come to your superiors, say, so-and-so, Comrade General, on my last business trip I got infected with some incomprehensible bullshit. Let's make a test subject out of me, and then violently disembowel me to see what kind of a fierce mandula it is. No, thank you. I won't even go through the archives. Because in this office, things get out in a hurry. So as long as my life isn't in danger, I'm not going to go public. Having finished the rest of the beer, I wanted to leave, but suddenly I saw a girl in an unusual dress who came up to me. Can I buy you a drink? My name is Lisa, she chirped softly. Dennis, nice to meet you. She smiled radiantly. What do you want? I waved my hand toward the shelves with drinks. Vermouth, please. That's a beautiful dress. Yes, it's Gucci from the latest collection, Lisa said with a haughty smile and moved a little closer. Touching the palm of her dress, I started to speak, but not in my own voice. Made in China, Guangdong Knitting Factory. You know, at that moment I was completely out of breath. Standing in front of me was a dazed and flushed Lisa. The ringtone of my smartphone snapped me out of this hellish cringe, and I quickly merged. Yes, Comrade General. I took the call in the car. Dennis, hello. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you come to the department now? Okay, I'll be right there. I exhaled and dropped the call. Okay, one more time. What the hell was that at the bar? Thought I was already turning the key in the ignition. The drive through evening Moscow quickly switched my mindset. Half an hour later, I was already pulling up to the headquarters. The general, as always, met me on the porch, smoking a cigarette. Hello, Dennis. You look better. The rest has done you good. He smiled, extending his hand. I'm shocked myself, Comrade General. Also smiling, I shook his hand. That's fine. Now about business. We have a mission for you, Dennis. What business trip, Pyotr Sergeyevich? I haven't taken my vacation yet, I said grudgingly. Consider it not a business trip, but a vacation to a sanatorium. You'll go on vacation. Again, fresh air. With a smile finished the man. But seriously. If seriously, in Krasnoyarsk region a group of geologists who were going to the Manskaya Loop disappeared. One of the local guides was waiting for them, but in the end, no one ever came. Neither in a day, nor in 2 days. Pyotr Sergeyevich finished, throwing the trigger into the trash can. Let's go and look at the pictures. After a while we were sitting in the office, looking at the photos, which did not inspire confidence. Mountains and hills covered with forest. Rivers. Beautiful, of course, but dangerous. I knew you'd like it. Anyway, let's go to the accounting office tomorrow and get going. Finished the chief, extending his hand. Yes, Comrade General, I shouted. I drove home with only one thought. That's all I needed now. An unscheduled business trip to some wilds, which are clearly not as rosy and cloudless as my superiors had promised. And I couldn't get the incident with the dress out of my head. It was impossible to write it off as a ridiculous accident. As I drove up, a brilliant idea struck me, which required immediate verification. I parked and walked toward the house. The weather was gorgeous. The cool summer breeze seemed like paradise after the sticky heat of the day. I sat down on a bench near the entrance, lit a cigarette, and exhaled a cloud of smoke. I took my smartphone out of my pocket, tested it in my hands, felt it, wondering about its origin. And it happened again. A voice echoed in my head, as if I were wearing headphones. A smartphone from a closed corporation called Rosnano STV311. Supermobile display, titanium pro anti-stress coating in an all-metal case. With a customized Saturn 1.2 transmitter. What else can I tell you, Dennis? What are you? I said calmly. To simplify it so that you understand, I am an artificial neural intelligence, capable of symbiosis with any life forms on your planet. And who created you? I asked, completely dumbfounded by what was happening. Are you really interested? The voice parried. Not really, I answered. To be honest, I was scared to find out the exact answer. I remembered that this thing wasn't from our planet. We'll have time to talk, and now it's time for you to rest. What should I call you? I asked. Call me Dianon. Yeah, well, that's a bit of a two-legged stumble, I smirked. But my interlocutor didn't reply to that. I mentally called out to him, just to check. In response, silence. At home, throwing Kostya on the couch, I opened my laptop to scroll through the information about the upcoming location. Places, frankly speaking, beautiful. The boss didn't lie. But it's unlikely that I'm waiting for a rainbow vacation. Oh well. The morning is the wiser. Woke up early. Shower, coffee, exercise. By the way, here's another weird detail. I haven't exercised since I was a cadet. But since the last trip, it's been like a switch. I've been doing 50 push-ups every morning in one go. Isn't that a miracle? And my muscles don't hurt like I'm working out on a regular basis. Oh well. Anyway, back and forth, it's 9 in the morning. I grabbed my purse and raced to work. Then I grabbed the owner's tickets and went to the airport. It would take 4.5 hours to fly to Krasnoyarsk, then another 40 minutes by cab to the village of Lukino, and there we would decide where the proverbial dog was buried. I arrived in the afternoon. I decided to have a snack and go to the nearest town cafe. Over a cup of coffee, I uncovered an escort to the go. The hotel room was carefully booked. Wow, Elysees Lights Hotel, 4 stars. Well, time to check in. I took a cab and thought I should rent a car after all. It's not going to work that way. The cab driver, a slightly overweight man, turned out to be sociable. We got to talking. Where are you from in our neighborhood? Smiling, he asked. My name is Andre, by the way, nice to meet you, Denis, I replied, extending my hand. I've come from Moscow on business. It's beautiful here, and you can relax in nature. Yes, the places here are noble. Game, fish, there's plenty of everything in the area. If you like that sort of thing. But people started to disappear in our area. Andrei said glumly. What do you mean, disappear? Just like that. 3 people went mushrooming here, and no one came home. The cops searched, rescuers, volunteers, but to no avail. That's how my friend Vanka disappeared. He was a cab driver, too. The man gloomed and took out a cigarette. He lit it and took a drag. I did not hurry to ask questions, and it was not in vain. The man, after a little silence, continued. But they found him like that. You know what, buddy? I wish they hadn't found him. His body was skinned, all meat. His mother died of a heart attack the same day they brought in what was left of him. The investigators couldn't find out anything. They buried Vanya in a closed coffin. That's the way it is. And now they say some geologists are missing. In our country anyway, news travels fast. I don't know what they were looking for in our land, but they never arrived at the appointed place. They say the guide waited for them all day and didn't wait. Then he got mad and called the cops, and then the cops and the conductors searched for them. And what did they find? I asked. Yeah, they're still looking for him. The case is probably already in the archives. Here is your hotel. So if you're going to have a vacation in the countryside, be careful there, said the man. That's all, thank you. I held out a $2,000 bill. "Keep the change. Have some tea, uncle." Such generosity. The man smiled and handed me a business card. "Here, my nephew made it for the occasion. Call me if you need a ride." "Thank you, it will come in handy." Smiling, I waved my hand and headed towards the front entrance. The hotel room was nicely decorated and had a view of the water. After taking a hot shower, I sat down at my laptop as usual. "What do you think you're going to do with this information?" I heard the voice in my head again. It made me cringe. At least give me a warning," I muttered unhappily. "Shouldn't you also put on some music before you show up?" The question remained. The voice spoke curtly. "I'll ask the conductor. Talk to the Appolits. What do you suggest?" "Well, I'd go and see what the radicalized shit is. And the guides and the cops won't say anything new about you." "That's a good idea." I grinned and thought about it. What if there really is some other worldly stuff out there? "What do you mean, what if?" the voice said. "It's out there. People disappear without a trace, unless they don't want them to." "Are you afraid?" the voice asked with a kind of sneer. "Of course I am. It's one thing to need and mop up, but it's another to fight with all sorts of mystical mandula among the gnarled, gloomy trees." "If you get lost, they won't find you," I said with a smile, already downloading maps from the server to my smartphone. "You'll be fine. It's better to order a car here." In front of my eyes on the laptop screen opened a page on which there was a car rental hosting with addresses and contacts. "Use it, don't thank me." With a smirk the voice said and disappeared, leaving me in complete confusion and deep moral stupor. Of course, nowadays high technology is not a surprise to anyone, but not to such an extent. The familiar world was crumbling like a house of cards, making me realize that life would never be the same again. It wasn't going to be the same. But what to do about it, I still, alas, do not know. With these thoughts, I went to bed. I woke up at 8 a.m. On the alarm clock. I got ready, took a shower. It was already 9. Going down to the hotel cafe, I ordered myself a coffee and some sandwiches. The beauty of an autonomous employee of our institution is that you are not required to report hourly and daily, and it is up to the employee's creativity and ability to accomplish the tasks at hand. In short, complete freedom of creativity. And Dianon is right about the questioning and interrogation. They are pointless. I won't learn anything new from them. So there's only one way out. Go there, I don't know where to look for something, I don't know what. Although the last one's pretty clear. We need to find the geologists, or at least what's left of them. And of course to find out what they were looking for and why. After breakfast I went straight to the rental parlor and rented a car for 3 days. An old Toyota Land Cruiser, just right for a trip to the countryside. But I had to drive to the village of Mansky. I arrived in the afternoon and decided not to drive into the village, but to go straight to the forest, to the place where the trek of the missing geologists started. Having parked by the roadside, I hastily changed my clothes, laced up my boots, threw on my pre-prepared rucksack and set off. For the first hour I walked along the usual path, noting the footprints of a large number of people looking for geologists. After a while I noticed some incomprehensible spots on the black trunks that looked like some white mold. If you didn't look closely, you wouldn't even notice them, but it was alarming. Nature is always full of a variety of sounds, but now there was a sepulchral silence. The path narrowed, and the forest seemed dead and hostile. There was a stench of fallen fall from the gloomy thickets. Clear debris crunched underfoot. To dispel the oppressive atmosphere, I tried to call Dianon, but the voice was silent. That made it even more uncomfortable. The narrow, barely visible path stretched among the Spalina hills and weeping fir trees. Their evergreen dresses had faded, dusted, and lost color. As I skirted the gullies choked with windswept ravines and the flooded pits covered with moss, it seemed that my footsteps could be heard all around. Even though I tried to walk as quietly as possible. Amidst the silence and the sound of my footsteps, I heard a disgruntled murmur. Damn, it was my own stomach insinuating that war is war and lunch is on a schedule. Making myself comfortable on a big and old stump, I pulled off my backpack and pulled out a young naturalist's kit, a can of stew, a tagine with dry alcohol, and a plastic bag with bread slices. I tried to eat as fast as possible. In 10 minutes the lunch was over. I put the empty can in a sealed bag, which went in my backpack to the nearest trash can. As I finished the rest of my coffee, I looked around. It looked like an ordinary forest, but something was bothering me. As I stood up from the stump and put my mug in my backpack, I glanced down at my feet. That's when I realized what had me so confused. It wasn't kindling that crunched under my feet as I silked. It was some bones blackened by time. What the hell was going on here? That was the only question that bothered me. And it was immediately answered by my uninvited neighbor. This place is a dead end. The master of this forest grew old and died before he could find a replacement. Now the dark side reigns here, which is getting bigger every day. The geologists haven't disappeared. They crossed a line invisible to humans. Now they are gone from your world, just as you are gone. That is, I asked in surprise, take from you someone here to look for, even the whole forest rhombic scouring, not a trace will not find. That's a twist. How long have you known that? From the very beginning, as soon as you came here, answered the voice. Why didn't you warn me? I parried. Why didn't you? I didn't want to spoil the experience. Yeah, well, you've done that. What do we do now, smartass? I said, throwing my backpack on my shoulders. Do what? Move forward and solve the problem. There's no turning back. You are now as cursed as this place. The cause must be found and neutralized, said Dianon, and interrupted the session. That's a hell of a prospect. Well, go ahead then. We play by your rules, gentlemen. I muttered. Knowing a little more about the place, I walked even more carefully. An hour later I came to a small stream, on the bank of which I found the remains of a fire and some footprints. They must have been left by the geologists. 4 pairs of feet. The campfire is definitely not more than 4 days old. Some broken stalks of grass. I found nothing else, but that was enough. I approached the water. The smell of rotten eggs hit my nose. I looked up and gasped at what I saw. The trees on the opposite bank of the river were decorated with wolf heads here and there. I wanted to get away from this location as soon as possible, but I had to examine the place more carefully, so I got to work. Soon my luck smiled on me. Under a tree away from the fire, I found an army harness hidden in the grass. There were some maps and an old ship's log. But from the condition of this journal, I assumed that it did not belong to our geologists. Finding nothing else of interest, I decided to follow the tracks, which went away from my intended route and stretched up the mountain. The tracks were lost among the gnarled trees. I had the impression that everything in this forest was stunted, sickly, and alien. After about an hour, the tracks changed to some incomprehensible furrows. It seemed that someone had dragged the bodies, but where and why? I didn't see any signs of struggle. That's odd. Wandering deeper into the thicket, I did not immediately realize that the forest had finally changed. The triangular giants had been replaced by dark trees twisted at unthinkable angles. They looked as if they were frozen in some kind of serpentine dance. As I looked up, it dawned on me that it was beginning to get dark. It was urgent to find a place and make a pass. At night in such places it is better not to stray. It got noticeably colder. The wind, walking among the mountain of hills, was gaining strength. I switched on my breast lantern, adjusted the brightness. Looked around and fucked myself. Completely. A whitish mist stretched among the knotty roots. It drowned on the ravines filled with sour gulch and broken windfall. It covered the clearings, wrapped under the woods, and hid the traces in the heavy silence. Somewhere down the hill, in the distance, there was a woman's cry. For a second, the sound made me feel a sharp dissonance. I froze. Soon the crying was repeated, and now it was joined by the stomping of boots. I immediately turned the flashlight to its lowest setting and stood behind a nearby tree. The footsteps grew louder, and with them a horror-filled cry. I closed my eyes for a second, and when I opened them I was startled. Before, I'd seen a more or less clear outline of the terrain, and that with a flashlight. But now everything was bright and more detailed. It was like watching a movie in good 3D quality, but there was no time to marvel. I saw some woman running ahead, dressed in an army military number, stumbling and falling, and behind her ran some strange people. They seemed to be artificially carved out of some rotten wood. They looked like wood, but they ran so fast. Waiting for the right moment, I grabbed the girl and pulled her to me, covering her mouth with my palm. Shh, shh, it's okay, I whispered, soothing her. Come on, let's go slowly before those pinheads wake up." I muttered, leading the girl up and away from the incomprehensible, scraggly creatures. It was hard to run because of the stinking, whitish fog. To the knotty, tenacious roots that grabbed my legs and tried to extinguish the light by banging my head against a stump hidden in the white haze. When we got to a relatively safe distance, it was finally dark. The steel sky was slowly being overcast with leaden clouds, and the air smelled of rain. Just what I needed right now. It was going through my head, and I quickly looked around. We had come out of a small valley. Judging by the sound, a small key was running somewhere nearby. The girl was sobbing and greedily gulping air with her mouth. All right, calm down. Everything will be all right now," I mumbled, holding her by the shoulders. "I'm Major Dinas Durov from the FSB. I'll help you. What happened? How many of you were there? What's your name?" "Nastya, there were 4 of us. A small expedition from the Geological Exploration Institute. We were supposed to go to the loop, but we lost the route, and when it got dark, we didn't go anywhere. So we decided to make a halt." The girl cried again. "Oh my God, they killed everyone. They came out of thin air. The guys spotted them when it was too late. I went to the bathroom. I guess that's what saved me. When I heard the guys screaming, I ran as fast as I could to get to them. God, there was nothing I could do to help them. I don't know how long I ran from there, but it felt like they were chasing me, but not attacking me. It felt like they were playing with me. That's it. Here, drink this. Calm down. This is normal water from home brought," I said, handing the girl a flask. Well, in fact, I learned everything that was important to me at the moment. What did it get me? Well, we got into some kind of spatial anomaly and managed to get into a kind of backstage. In simple terms, it's the dark side of the old bloodbaths. That's a fact. Is this how to get out of it? Obviously by defeating the so-called bosses. Will that help? Hell if I know. So we'll just take it one problem at a time. During these simple thoughts, I forgot about Nastya, who, having unscrewed the cap of the flask, began to drink greedily. After a couple of sips, she spit out the contents on the ground and began to greedily gulp air with her mouth. What's the matter? I picked the flask up off the ground and sniffed. The smell of alcohol hit my nose. Wow, I think I got the flasks mixed up. I unhooked the second flask from my belt and took a little sip. "This is water, here you go." Smiling, I handed the girl another flask. She looked at me in disbelief, but she took the water. "What were you even looking for here? Kolchak's treasure is quite the other way." Looking at the time, I asked. Nastya, closing the flask, answered. According to one of the Selkob legends, in these places there was a stopover of one of the ancient tribes. The people of this tribe took out the hearts of enemy soldiers and sealed them in wooden idols carved in the image of a man. They, in turn, were soaked in blood. According to this legend, these idols were supposed to protect the tribe's inhabitants from disease and bad hunting. These creatures were called poikups, wooden people, the girl finished. She spoke more or less calmly. Apparently, she was beginning to come to her senses. The alcohol had done its work. Well, people have long gone to their brothers to drink tea, but the defenders apparently remained. And they are doing lawlessness on the territory entrusted to them. I summarized, adjusting my backpack. "It turns out so," answered the girl, already quite calmly. "Well, we have to go because we've been standing here for too long," I said, leading her away. There were no roads or paths. There was only an incomprehensible white haze, through which black twisted tree trunks were visible. And then something happened that almost made my heart sink into my ass. Nastya stumbled backwards and plunged into the fog-hidden marsh up to her neck. The only thing she managed to do was to slide her hand down my leg and grab my shoelaces. That made me sit on my ass. My shoelaces snapped and were about to snap at the worst possible moment. At the last second, I managed to grab her wrist and pull. Surprisingly, I had no trouble getting the girl out of the slurry. But you can't get far in wet rags, so I had to look for a quiet place, make a fire and dry off a bit. The girl was covered in mud and soaked to the skin. "So something must be done about it," I said, picking up a stronger stick. "Here you are. Do you know what to do?" Yes, of course," answered the girl. She began to walk more carefully and felt the road in front of her with the stick. And I was completely perplexed. In such a mountainous area there should not be any sinkholes. Slowly it began to lighten, but the fog did not even think of clearing. The sky pressed leaden clouds on the hilltops and did not think of waking the sun. Soon we came to a gentle clearing surrounded by beautiful pine trees and stunted yellowing grass. Looking at the terrain, we decided to take a short break. Nastya needed to quickly wring out her clothes and dry herself off a bit. I quickly built a fire and started to get some provisions. Now we'll have a snack, rest a little, and then we'll go on. A well-fed body is more likely to help us dry off, I said, smiling. Nastya took off her clothes, shook out the tina, wrung out her pants and windbreaker. When she sat down by the fire, it was obvious that the incident had almost finished her. "It's all right, it'll be all right. Here you go," I said, handing her a can of stew and a camping spoon. "Dennis, how did you get here?" asked the girl. "My superior sent me for you, so I went. And when I came, I found only you, so I got stuck here like you." "What do you mean, stuck?" asked the girl. "You see, the forest lost its master and went to the dark side. As they say, with all the consequences, now we need to clean up what's lurking here. And I think only then we can return home," I answered, adding brightness on my chest light. "All right, let's go. We'll get through this." The forest was bristling with brushwood. Slippery roots lurked in the mist. It smelled of dampness and mucky earth. From the side of a ravine littered with forest debris, I heard the crackle of dry branches. I twitched at the sound, and I shuddered at what I saw. 3 pairs of glowing eyes were staring at me. "What? What is it?" Staring into the darkness in a whisper, Nastya asked. "Wolves," I answered, machine. I didn't want to scare her. I took out a TTT and screwed the can on it. Nastya trembled. I could tell she was on the verge of hysterics. "Oh, come on. This is the most harmless thing that could have happened to us," I whispered. Oh, how wrong I was. And I soon paid for my self-confidence. I grabbed Nastya by the waist and jerked her onto a tree branch. "Okay, get up higher. Under no circumstances do not get down until I call you." He stepped aside and waited. The wolves didn't move. They seemed to be studying me, deciding whether to attack or wait until I was weak, but the sharp pain in my right leg and the clang of fangs instantly snapped me out of my focused stupor. Automatically, I turned around and pulled the hook. The silence was broken by a muffled pop, a squeal, and soon it was quiet. A big wolf lay at my feet. My back and right leg stung. A sharp pain drove me to one knee. My head was foggy. I looked around with great effort. The others were moving away, breaking branches beneath them. And then I realized that there was no pain. I looked down at my leg, expecting to see a bloody laceration, and was startled. There was nothing there. Just a torn pant leg. There wasn't a scratch on the skin. Whew, what a scare I had. I exhaled and went towards the tree where Nastya was sitting. I helped her down from the snag and put her on the ground. "Oh, what about your clothes?" she asked, looking at the torn pant leg. "It's all right, it's nothing. I got caught on some branch." "And the wolves?" "Where are the wolves?" "Did they run away?" "They ran away. I wounded one of them, but the others didn't dare attack." Nothing happened for the last couple of hours. The girl was beginning to come to her senses and was even cheerful and smiling. But it was obvious that she was exhausted. We had already passed a dozen kilometers, and this damn forest did not even think to change. It seemed endless. All around were the same fog-shrouded branches, and the steel sky covered with frowning clouds. It felt like it was always fall. The dead silence that reigned everywhere was broken by the sobbing breeze that blew through the aged, shriveled crowns. It was not getting any brighter. Nastya suggested that it must be evening by now. The watch on my hand showed 3:30 in the afternoon. I had long ago stopped trusting them. According to my internal clock, it should be early morning now, somewhere around 6. After a while, I began to feel someone's invisible presence. Nastya felt it too, and you could see her tense up again. She began to nibble her lips nervously, and there was a slight tremor in her hands. "Come on, calm down. It's okay though," soothing the girl, I said. And Melgal himself was having bad thoughts. "It's obviously no fucking good." I tried to calm my built-in Alice, but the voice was traitorously silent again, and it made me feel uncomfortable. But there was no time to think about it now. The wind was picking up. There was a rumble in the distance. I pulled off my jacket and put it on the girl. "This will be better for you," I said, pulling the hood over her head. "What about you?" she asked, embarrassed. "What about me?" "I'm used to it," I smiled and looked at her. My jacket became her cloak. Well, that's not bad. Soon we came to a strange clearing. Why strange? Because it looked as if the place had once burned. The ground was blackened and covered with petrified ash. Here and there you could see charred pieces of trees, and the smell was like being in a Jews' station. At the far end of the clearing lay a large flat stone, blackened by time and soot. And then Nastia almost shuddered, covered her mouth with her palm in horror. "It's not just a stone, it's an altar. What makes you think so?" I asked, coming closer. She was right. It was an altar. The stone had strange markings on the sides, and there were gutters running down from the flat surface, apparently to drain the blood. As I looked up at the nearby trees, a shiver ran through me. The charred, blackened trunks were carved with some strange faces that looked remotely human. Fucking hell. I was lucky to be out of the woods. I spit and looked around. "Let's get out of here. It's uncomfortable here," I muttered, and we went on, but it was not so easy to get out of this clearing. The forest seemed reluctant to let us out, and the mountains around us seemed to have moved closer. The presence of something invisible became stronger. It was always like someone was watching us closely. There was no one, by God. Out of the corner of my eye, I began to notice that something was wrong with the trees. It was as if they were changing, but when I looked around, everything went back to normal. Nastia didn't notice the changes right away either, but when she started to notice something, it was too late to retreat. Some indistinct silhouettes began to appear through the tree trunks, and they became clearer every second. Wooden people, blackened by time, covered with moldy moss and stale needles, who looked as if they were alive, stood looking at us. Their faces, covered with cobwebbed cracks, seemed to express nothing, but their eyes, burning with blue fire, stared with a primal fury. And then they all spoke at once. They said that this was their land, and that we would stay here forever. Nastia jerked to the side, but fainted from fear and exhaustion. The creatures came closer and closer, narrowing the circle. For a while I couldn't understand how they were moving at all. They seemed to float, and then, without thinking, I started shooting. The blued steel spat lead, making the creatures disappear and reappear. A sharp blow knocked the ground out from under his feet. The gun flew aside. My back hit the ground with all the passion I could muster. During the shooting, I had completely forgotten about Nastia. Lying on the ground, I looked in her direction. My body stabbed with fire. One of the strange wooden creatures was already standing next to her. "You're staying with us." A creaky voice came to me. I struggled to stand up, clenching my fists. A wild rage came over me. My hands began to be covered with a viscous substance. An incomprehensible lightness spilled over my body. I unclenched my palms. Tight anthracite threads stretched from my fingers. I looked down at my feet and saw that the substance was enveloping me, as if woven from uncured black resin. From behind, someone tried to grab me, but immediately the absorbent cotton weakened and crumbled to ashes. My head smelled of burning wood and fallen wool. Another creature came at me from the side. I dodged the blow and slammed its head into the ground. They could no longer harm me. They crumbled and fell apart at my touch. Leosha came to himself in the soft grass. The morning sun was shining in his face. Birds were chirping on the tree branches. Grasshoppers were chirping in the green bushes. The air was humid and smelled like the sea for some reason. Nastia was lying nearby. I got up and went over to her. Quietly began to shake her by the shoulders. The girl slowly began to come to her senses. Then frightened opened her eyes and breathed often. "Shesh, shesh, it's okay. Did we get out?" "I think so." I said reassuringly. I helped her up and we walked on. Almost immediately we found a wide sandy path. It was very warm and even hot, and when we heard the cries of seagulls, we ran to the nearest gap among the trees. We had a wonderful view of the sea and sand. Nastia's eyes bulged and she closed her mouth in amazement. How is it so? How did we get here? I said. I'm not sure how we got out of here, I said. The main thing is that we got out, she said, smiling, patting me on the shoulder. Yeah, you're right. I put my arm around her and we rocked back to the trail. Soon we heard the rumble of passing cars, and when we got to the road, I was totally freaking out. The first road sign said Zelenogradsk and the next one said Kaliningrad, 28 kilometers away. When I was already on the plane from Kaliningrad to Moscow, I managed to read the notes I had found in the forest. Unfortunately, the magazine has not been preserved in its entirety. Time and bad weather did their job. Only one page has survived. What was written there, I'll read it to you right now, and you can judge for yourselves. April 5th, 1950. 6 of us. The International Archaeological Group. The first joint expedition of the year. We went to the ancient temples. We reached the village quickly. April 6th, 1950. 11:20 in the afternoon. I can't believe my eyes. We've just discovered perhaps the greatest artifact in history, the Akron Woodmen. They're real. There are exactly 12 of them, just like the old legend says. The legend itself was apparently described below, but it didn't count at all. April 7th, 1956.47. Something went wrong. One of the idols was damaged during the excavation. Either I'm going crazy or the terrain around here has really changed. Dead birds started falling from the trees. Animals are leaving the grounds in a hurry. April 8th, 19:54 a.m. They seem to be everywhere. That's the end of the record. So what do we have in the end? A group of archaeologists woke up an ancient evil, paid with their lives, and condemned the area to eternal darkness. Yeah, it happens. On arrival in Moscow, I went straight to the office. Nastia was taken by her parents, who vowed to deliver her to us tomorrow in the best way. In the morning, I was already being waited for by a company Gelik, which comfortably and luxuriously drove me to my place of work. My superiors were waiting for me at the entrance in their unchanged uniform and, according to the old tradition, leisurely sipping a cigarette. Greetings, Comrade General. The task at hand has been accomplished. The enemy is defeated. The country can sleep easy, I reported from the chair. Well done. Denis, I knew you could do it. Well, what happened there? Smiling, the man said, holding out a pack of Winstons to me. Thank you, Pyotr Sergeyevich, I said, taking out a cigarette. And the following happened. In the 50s, the International Archaeological Expedition was excavating in a given square, during which 20 pagan guards made of wood were discovered, over which an ancient pagan rite had been performed earlier. While retrieving one of the guards, the Coparium workers managed to damage one of the artifacts. The entire group was then destroyed by those very same guards. My guess is that the archaeologists tried to burn down the excavation site, but made things worse. Since then, the area has fallen into some sort of spatial anomaly. In this regard, people began to disappear, which is what happened to our geologists. And how did you manage to cope with these circumstances? Peter Sergeyevich looked intently into my eyes. And this is already my personal secret. Smiling, I answered. But come on, in fact, it's simple. They were afraid of water. I added, tossing the Kurak in the trash. All right then, glad you made it. You know, Denis, that was the last exam. You can now officially join the ASO, says the warden. Pyotr Sergeyevich, you know, in this assignment I probably finally realized that I'm not a team player. I'm more of a solo player. So I'd prefer to stay where I am, if possible. Pyotr Sergeyevich sighed, then smiled and replied. Of course, stay. I'd be honored to work with such a professional. One more week of rest for you, and then get back in line. Work your ass off as usual, the man said with feigned seriousness. Yes, Comrade General. Sitting in my apartment on my couch, I decided to turn to Dianon again and ask one single question. Why did you help only at the very end? And immediately I heard the answer. Come on, who helped you with the wolves? If it wasn't for me, you'd have bled to death, and you definitely wouldn't have made it to the end. I kept quiet because you weren't alone. Didn't want to embarrass you in front of the lady. Hey, learned that from a lady's dress in a bar, I take it? Well, what else can you do? I asked with a smile. Take your time, Denis. We have a lot of time to get to know each other, and now your body needs rest. said the voice and disappeared into consciousness. "I'd like to add a little from myself. Do not look for what is not hidden by you. Otherwise you risk paying immeasurably more than the price of the find."